welcome to Human Ascension with Ellie. I'm going to tell you this in advance of telling you anything else. I have tried to prepare this episode so many times that I'm beginning to lose the will to live, but I'm going to get through it one way or another. Everything that you can imagine happening in a person's life, whether it be technical or just mundane, has taken place every time I try and record this episode. And so bear with me, but it's just this very strange phenomenon. I'm beginning to wonder whether it's because of the episode content that this is taking place. I've never had so many problems in my life. Everything from endless people knocking on the door to technical malfunction, to losing my notes, to having to rewrite, to having to ad-lib. I've recorded the entire episode and then gone to edit it and it had vanished. And I've done everything. So I'm actually, before I forget, I'm going to put my phone on airplane mode just to make sure I don't get interrupted. The dog is sleeping, so hopefully we're good. I can't imagine anyone's coming to visit. I'm not expecting anything to happen, and we're just going to see whether I can get through this episode. So, wish me luck. Today, I want to talk about the actual prophecy that a lot of people are talking about right now all over the internet. And that is the Hopi prophecy by the Hopi tribe. This is a Native American tribe that has a long-standing prophecy that was made kind of famous in the 1950s in religious circles when it was announced during a religious conference. I think it was in 1959. This prophecy has become popularized in the current few weeks or few months, particularly in the United States, with the re-election of Donald Trump as president. And it's because of a particular part of the prophecy that has been very closely kind of emphasized as being relevant to the future. And I did, my subscribers on the Ellie Dreams Another channel have asked me repeatedly to do a tarot reading on this subject. And it took me a while to get to it, but eventually I started getting multiple inbox requests via email and all sorts of things. And so I did take a look. I hadn't done any research on the prophecy at that point. But what I did do was I just learnt enough to know that there was one and what the crucial element of the prophecy was. And then I did a tarot card reading to find out whether or not it was a legitimate prophecy or whether it was just some kind of propaganda, like the many Nostradamus ones that appear. Have you noticed that? Towards the end of every year, every calendar year, suddenly there will be this influx of Nostradamus predictions about the following year and all kinds of doom and gloom. And generally, those are either clickbait or they're some kind of propaganda. Often they are from a foreign adversary, such as Russia or something like that, in an attempt to troll the American public and to get them anxious about the next year. But also there will be people who are monetizing clickbait. And so they add the word Nostradamus to a video. They record with artificial intelligence all kinds of beautiful images, and they've even got a superimposed voiceover that's AI generated, and it's reading through a script of this prophesized event that's supposed to take place in the following year that was predicted by Nostradamus, which actually isn't true. It's a distortion of the actual predictions, and that's the reason why it happens every year at this time. That's the most prevalent. However, I wanted to just ask the cards whether this Hopi prophecy was like that or whether it was legit. And what really got my interest was that the cards seemed to indicate this was a legitimate prophecy. So I've added a link to that particular tarot card reading to the description for this episode today for anyone who's interested in seeing it. But since then, I've gone and I've done a bit of research to find out about this prophecy. And I do have my notes because I know that this is probably going to be one of those attempts today to be able to actually get my point across and create an episode. And I've got as much in front of me that I can find to help me apart from maybe a shot of whiskey. But I'm going to do my best. Anyway, let's see if we can just get through this. The prophecy is centered around a covenant that was made between the Hopi tribe and the divine spirit or the divine creator. They call it the divine spirit or the great spirit. Actually, I think it is. And so when I refer to the great spirit during today's episode, I'm actually talking about the creator of humanity or God or the divine element of some kind. But it's described as the Great Spirit by the Hopi tribe. Following the Great Flood that appears in traditional folklore, which seems to be, on the surface of things, the very same Great Flood that is discussed in the Bible and by religions and traditions all over the world. Even some of the ancient wisdoms reference it as well. It also appears in some of the secret gospels, and the Book of Enoch, for example, and other Gnostic texts that have been located in the mid-20th century and that had been lost for thousands of years. This great flood appears to have taken place around 10,000 years ago. It wiped out all of humanity, someone like Noah and his family, or the equivalent. There are even equivalents to that appear in Australian Indigenous folklore, the Aboriginal folklore, here where I am, that talk about the people who were left behind, whose purpose it was to repopulate the earth. Well, the Hopi tribe have in this prophecy or in this folklore an understanding that they were allowed to live. They were saved from the flood, but they were required to enter into a covenant with the Great Spirit on how they were going to proceed moving forward. And they promised the Great Spirit that they would live in a closeness to nature and to the desire of the Great Spirit, and that they would never deviate. And as a result of that, the chieftain of the Bao clan of the tribe led his faithful to a new land, which I believe is a migration from Mexico through to the US. And the area that the great chieftain led his tribe to was known as the Four Corners within the heart of Turtle Island, which is the name that was given to the United States. Now, the heart or the heartland and the Four Corners consisted of Arizona, New Mexico, Utah, and Colorado. They had promised to live very simply, producing abundant crops and living as close to the requirements of the Great Spirit as they could. But shortly after moving into those Four Corners, into the heartland, the chieftain of the Bao clan fell into evil ways, and his two sons ended up having to take over leadership of the Hopi tribe. There was an older son or an elder son and a younger son. And these two brothers ended up being directed to go in two different directions by the Great Spirit. The elder brother was instructed to go east and head towards the rising sun. The younger brother was instructed by the Great Spirit to stay in that heartland area and to travel the land and mark his footsteps. In response to that, they were given two tablets of revelation called the Toponi tablets, and each of them were given one to take with them on their travels. And so that's what they did. In the meantime, the Hopi people settled into this new area of the Four Corners, which are those four different states. And they did. They lived as they were required to do for a very long time. However, shortly after that, the white man discovered the United States or that land area, and they began to settle. The Hopi were given a prophecy of the fact that the white man would be coming and that he would start a course of action that would result in a time that is called the purification, which is when the earth would ultimately have to be destroyed, or this cycle of humanity would have to be destroyed and purified so that it can then live in its next incarnation. And they were told that it was part of this transition from the fourth world that they currently live in to a fifth world that was coming soon, and that there would be 9 signs that would be part of the message that this time is coming. The 9 signs are as follows. So actually, before I go into that, I should say that the way that the prophecy unfolds, it says that humanity appears in different cycles of evolution. And in order to go from one cycle to another, the older cycle has to be destroyed to make way for the newer cycle. This is really interesting because this actually coincides almost exactly to the writings of Helena Blavatsky. Helena Blavatsky is well, she's passed now, a long time ago, but she was a Ukrainian psychic from the Russian Empire who traveled the world, primarily to areas of India and Tibet, with what she called her ancient masters, and learned about the future of the world and the origins of humanity and the cycles of evolution. She wrote a number of books, the most famous of which is called The Secret Doctrine. I've actually done a 3-part series about Helena Blavatsky, the Secret Doctrine book, and how it actually was used by the Nazi regime to be able to gather strength and momentum for their movement during the Second World War. And that's something that you can find in previous episodes. However, for the purposes of today, it's really just the matter that her book, The Secret Doctrine, which is probably the underpinning text for everything that resulted in New Age thinking or spirituality as we presently know it in the modern day. It all comes from the teachings of Helena Blavatsky. It's only just evolved a little bit here and there, but basically we're not learning anything new that she hasn't already written. Helena Blavatsky is also a co-founder of the Theosophical Society, which is still in existence. It has chapters in England, or it started in England and the United States, and it's now spread throughout the world, still operating. We have 2 chapters here in my area of Australia, in my state that I'm aware of, one of which is not that far away, I think, from where I live, although I haven't been there yet, and one is in Melbourne, in the city. So that's the relevance there. However, the Hopi tribe had no relationship whatsoever to Helena Blavatsky, and that's the reason why I think that their interpretation of prophecy and the cycles of humanity being continuous but having to end in order for there to be an incarnation of a new phase is really interesting, because of the fact that it works so closely with that was described by Helena Blavatsky. However, in order to continue on with the story, let me tell you what the 9 signs are that this prophecy is about to be fulfilled. They've all taken place apparently, except the 9th one, the final one, is a bit debatable. The first sign was the coming of white-skinned men who would take over the land that was not theirs, that belonged to the Hopi people, and strike their enemies with thunder. Now, that is something that is the Hopi tribe believe has taken place, and striking the enemies with thunder is, the white men coming with guns, basically, and using them against the Hopi people. The second sign, which of course is what they did when they did settle into the Americas. The second sign is described as the spinning wheels filled with voices. And this now is understood to be the covered wagons that the white men used as transport when they actually did come and settle into the Americas. The third sign of this prophecy unfolding was a strange beast like a buffalo with long horns. This is considered to be the cattle that the white man brought with them when they migrated and settled in the Americas. The fourth sign of this prophecy coming true was the land being crossed by snakes of iron. Now this is considered to be the introduction of the railroad system throughout America, and so that also appears to have come true. The fifth sign of the prophecy coming true is the land crisscrossed by a giant spider's web. Now, since the prophecy was first discovered, this has been interpreted to be the telecommunication lines that have appeared in the US, along with the internet and other forms of technology that act as a spider's web and cover the entire world and help us to communicate with each other. They are a bit like a giant spider's web, and so that's what has been interpreted from that sign. The sixth sign is that the land would be crisscrossed with rivers of stone that made pictures in the sun. Now, if you imagine the highways of modern society, particularly with things like traffic lights and headlights, that explains this particular sign of the prophecy unfolding. It's the crisscross of the highways and the bright lights that you see as traffic is moving through those areas or during the nighttime when the street lights are on. The seventh sign was described as the sea turning black and many living things dying because of that black sea. This has been interpreted to have come true and is considered to be the variety of oil spills that have taken place over the course of years. And there was a prevalence of those oil spills in the early to mid and even the later part of the 20th century. The eighth sign is described as the youth joining tribal nations to learn their ways and wisdom, and it included the young people growing their hair long as well. This is considered to have come true, and it's supposed to be a description of the hippie movement, which involved people growing their hair long, dressing almost as though in a tribal manner, and many of the young people returning back to a more natural type of existence, which included living within tribes to be able to learn tradition and things like that during the 60s. So that was considered to have come true as well. The final sign, which is the ninth sign, is the one that's debated. However, there are those that believe that it has also come true. And this is described as a dwelling place in the heavens, falling with a great crash, appearing as a blue star. Now, there was a US space station Skylab crash that took place, and I don't know whether, I can't recall if it was in the 1970s or the 1990s. I've got I think I've got a bit of an error in my notes, but it was something that was observed in Australia at that time, and there was a blue light that appeared visible as the Skylab was crashing. And so it's been perceived by some that was the fulfillment of that ninth sign. Now, the way that those 9 signs progress is they talk about the steps that in the prophecy that will take place that will demonstrate to the Hopi people that the prophecy is unfolding. And so it seems as though all of those have now taken place. So the prophecy continues and explains that as these 9 signs transpire and are fulfilled, the Hopi people should await the return of what they are now calling the Pahana. Now, the Pahana is actually the elder brother uh, of the chieftain of the Bao clan. So the elder brother and the younger brother both went their ways, and the elder brother is the one that was instructed by the Great Spirit to travel east. Now, do we know where east is? Is East Asia, or is east a sort of a symbolic direction of travel? It's difficult to tell. However, the younger brother stayed in the west. The older brother was directed to go east. And that is really relevant to the most notable part of the prophecy, which is about a man wearing a man in a red cloak or a red hat, which, as you can imagine, has been interpreted to potentially be Donald Trump. Now, what happens in the prophecy is that the Pahana, the great Pahana, who is considered to be the lost white brother, or the elder brother from the clan. He was originally Hopi, just like all of the other Hopi tribes people. However, having been instructed to travel to the east, he transformed into a white man. He transformed into the great white brother. That's the way that it's described. Except he will be recognizable because despite having turned white, his hair will remain black. And that's what's written in the prophecy. He will come in a red cap or a red cloak. But it's not specific to him. It says that there will be a return of the Hopi tribes people in red cap or red cloak. And this is where it gets a little bit tricky. A lot of people in today's interpretation of this think that the prophecy is talking about the red MAGA hat. But I'm not convinced that that's the case, because for the white brother to return, then he would have to continue to have black hair despite the fact that he's turned white. And as we know, Donald Trump doesn't have black hair. However, for the purposes of carrying on, I'll carry on with this prophecy. Upon return, he will return back from one of two directions. And the direction that he comes from is important when it comes to what's going to happen next. If what the prophecy states, if he comes from the east, then he's the true great brother, and he'll be recognizable. There'll be a red cloak or a red hat, but he'll also have black hair. And if he comes from the east, this is a good sign. This is a sign that the people are ready to ascend and continue forward in a positive way without there being too much trouble in between. But if he comes from the west, then it's going to be a very difficult time for humanity. But either way, regardless of whether he comes from the east or from the west, his arrival back will include him bringing back the Taponi, which are the tablets of revelation that he and his younger brother were both given. And when he returns, it's going to begin a moment in time called the Great Purification. Now, this is where it gets really interesting, this prophecy, because the Great Purification, the Hopi believe that they will be flown to other planets. They'll be taken away from this earthly existence, and that everyone who remains will be subject to this great purification. And they believe that they're going to be flown away in ships without wings, which sounds a little bit like your otherworldly UFO type of spacecraft. Now, this is a prophecy that was that's claimed. I mean, it was given attention in 1959 at a religious conference. However, the Hopi people believe it to have been in existence for thousands of years. And so, I mean, I wasn't alive then, I can't tell you for sure, but that's what the Hopi tribe believes. So this would have come from folklore, from stories at the campfire and things like that. However, there's also a rock carving that has stood for hundreds of years that also is claimed to verify this prophecy, which I'm going to go into in a bit more detail in a moment. But during the Great Purification, what's going to happen is humanity will be given an opportunity to ascend and move forward into their new existence, which is into the fifth world. But not everyone. There will be those who have stood on the backs of others and been part of like a big lie. And those people have prospered at the expense of those who are meek or who aren't able to prevent the events of the world. And those people will be eliminated, basically. So there's going to be, according to the Hopi prophecy, there's going to be like an intervention that takes place. And it's described as an intervention by people who fall from the sky. It's difficult to tell from the prophecy whether this is an act of war that's taking place. And so when you combine together the people falling from the sky or some kind of an intervention from the sky, together with a people that are cloaked in red or in which a red cap is part of this intervention and this arrival or visitation from elsewhere, especially if it's coming from the east, this sounds very much like a world war in which the adversary could be from China. The color matches, the direction of travel matches, and also this sprinkling of people from the sky would indicate, and also ships without wings, all of that would indicate that there's aeroplanes or bombers or parachuting and physical invasion. And the red color coincides with the red that's often associated with China. And also the arrival from the east also would indicate that those Eastern Asian countries are involved, such as India or China, and things like that. And also, other nations in that region. But it can also alternatively sound as though it's coming from other planets. And that the Hopi tribe does speak of it with an air of the cosmic or interplanetary type of talk. They talk about the stars, the fact that these people are falling from the stars or coming from the stars. And so this could actually be a prophecy about an extraterrestrial encounter. And if that's the case, then the next part of the prophecy would be pretty scary for anyone who has been part of this world's control. So part of the world order element of existence. Because whoever it is that comes from the sky, whether it be an extraterrestrial visitation or intervention of any kind, or whether it be some kind of a war that's being discussed, those entities that are arriving, that are cloaked in red, and are a return of the Hopi people in a way, or the big white brother, they are here to destroy the dark forces. So basically, the dark forces that have kept humanity trapped in this material cycle that is really going nowhere in this fourth world. And so there is a carving that has stood for hundreds of years. And in that carving, there's a description of what actually is going to take place. Humanity is at a crossroad. And I'll put the carving up on the screen so that it can be seen. But basically, for those who can see the carving now, you'll see that there is on the far left a sun symbol that has a swastika inside it. That is considered to be the equivalent symbol to something like the masculine divine. And the swastika, although it's been used by the Nazis in a negative way, its original Hindu origins describe it as being like a purity element relating to the masculine. So it's very closely associated to the masculine divine. And the sun symbol is one of enlightenment and the force of the creator. The large figure that sits next to it with what looks like a pan is actually the Great Spirit, or the return of the white brother. This is the elder, or the great Pahana. And the offering that he has there is considered to be the instructions to the Hopi people to lay down their weapons, basically. There's two vertical lines here. One of them reaches upward to a higher plane, and then another one has a cross below it. The first line, where the Great Spirit stands, has a circle next to it. And this represents the point in which he touches humanity. So this is the point of his return. There are two paths that are horizontal paths that lead from there. The higher path is actually populated by 4 smaller human figures. And this is the path of the 4 different races that had been created by the Great Spirit. The 4 races of human, which consist in the Hopi prophecy of 4 different skin colors. So basically the white people, black people, yellow people, and red people. And the red people are considered to be the Hopis. So basically they all were created by the Great Spirit, and they all traveled out to different corners of the earth. They're represented by these 4 different figures at the top. And as you can see, there is a horizontal line that then begins to lead to a staircase. Well, that staircase is the advancement of technology. And so that's one path that humanity progresses to. The lower horizontal path is the path towards nature. This is the path that the Hopi people promised to follow in their covenant with the Great Spirit. And it has a number of symbols there. The first symbol is a cross. That is the creation of Christianity and religion. And that cross sits directly below another vertical path that links the path of natural wholeness and existence with the earth, as instructed by the Great Spirit, and the line leads upward to the higher path, which is the path of technological advancement and materialism, basically. And Christianity is placed there with a cross to demonstrate that the changes, the splintering off of humanity took place as a result of the creation of these organized religions. If we continue down that lower path, you'll see 2 large circles. Those circles represent World War I and World War II. They are described in the prophecy as being the great shakings, where the earth would be shook and that many people would die, and that there would be a great deal of destruction as well during that time. Well, the first circle relates to World War I, and the second circle relates to World War II, which is when humanity was shaken up by those wars. The line then continues, and you'll see that there is a thicker vertical line that joins the 2 levels, the upper and the lower level. This represents the return of the Great Spirit, or the Great Pahana. And this is where the choice will have to be made by humanity as to which path they're going to take. Some people will not have a choice. And the people who will not have a choice will be the ones who have led the earth, basically. The leadership that is represented by these four different figures on the top line. These are the people who have controlled the world order and have turned it into the materialistic, fearful, anxiety-ridden place that it is, where people are fighting and are divisive, and the earth is unprotected and comes to harm, and people suffer in order to make other people rich, that kind of thing, where the focus is all on the material and acquisition and things like that, and that everything else is sacrificed for the betterment of people who are abusing their environment and their earth and their fellow man. These people will be hunted down by those who come from the sky. Now, it's difficult to tell from the prophecy whether those who come from the sky are actually the same as the Great White Brother and actually the same as the Great Spirit. But it does sound as though it's a course of time that has been predetermined by the creator of humanity and the creator of all things, and that it has to happen in this way. So I will just make an assumption for the purpose of today's episode that it's all the same, that it's all the controlling element of our creator. So, for example, Mark Zuckerberg is well known for being out there, well, he's not physically, but he's got workmen out there in the middle of nowhere building him a world-class bunker so that he can hide from whatever's coming next if necessary. According to the prophecy, there is no hiding. There is no way to hide. And so what this indicates is it could very well be either something like a nuclear attack where there's no way to really hide from a nuclear attack. You're either right there at the epicenter or you end up with fallout. Or it's an attack from the sky from otherworldly beings who are so much more advanced than humanity that they know what everyone is thinking, every single person, and they can track down every individual as needed. According to the prophecy, all of those people who have taken over the earth and controlled its existence, these human people, are going to have their heads cut off. That is the actual wording within the prophecy, that they would all just be decapitated. The rest of them, and that they can't hide. They can't hide behind false reputation. They can't hide behind religion. They can't hide behind popularity or money. They can't physically hide anywhere. That they will be identifiable as individuals, and that their lives will end. Their life path will end, basically, and they will forever be trapped in this reincarnation of material existence that essentially gets worse and worse and worse. And so that staircase on the top line basically goes nowhere. It goes to a point and then it disappears, and that is the end of existence for those people. But everyone else who doesn't fall into that category will be given an opportunity to redeem themselves and to return to the earth and to return to a simpler life and to look inward for the answers. And their life path, which has 2 ears of corn. So the circle appears there. You've got a vertical line linking the 2 upper and lower path. The upper path disappears. The lower path continues indefinitely. And the 2 ears of corn that appear in that lower path are the symbols of returning to the earth and choosing the yellow corn, which is basically the simple way. And as you'll see on the far right of that line, you'll see another human figure. That represents the continuance of humanity to be able to move forward. The people who redeem themselves, or those who are meek, or those who've lived a natural life in accordance with the instructions of the Great Spirit, will be allowed to continue to live. And that path continues indefinitely, which means that they have an opportunity to move into the 5th world. And then as you can see, there's a Celtic cross on the far right, demonstrating the feminine element, like the feminine divine, that allows for this continuation of life. Now, obviously, this is only the 14th time that I've tried to record today's episode. And so I hope I haven't been too frustrating in my explanations. I'm just glad that I haven't been cut off yet. But you can see, even from the clumsy explanations that I've given, that this Hopi prophecy is so much like many of the other descriptions of what ascending to a higher level, ascending to something new, transitioning into a new reality or a new type of existence for humanity, moving forward towards the feminine divine, or having a feminine element overthrow the toxicity of a stale masculine patriarchy. These are all things that sound very similar to the Hopi prophecy. And so it is very interesting. But people have really stuck themselves to this fellow in the red cap element. And after doing some research about this Hopi prophecy, and I didn't limit my research to YouTube because, this is the thing. The YouTube prophecies and the YouTube research and all the explanation is really hit and miss. If you look at other people's opinions about a prophecy or about spirituality or the future, all you really get is somebody else's opinion. You have to kind of go elsewhere for that information. What I did was I ended up going to a paper that was written for a university back in 2010. It was a research paper written by a fellow who uses a pen name, and his pen name is Mobius Rex. He's basing his research on a book by a fellow called Frank Waters that was published in 1993 called The Book of Hopi. And this prophecy appears in the Book of Hopi. It's a book that was published by Ballantine Books in New York and became public in 1993. So this paper that he wrote is a research paper that is based on the book by Frank Waters. And so I thought, because this paper had been written in 2010, then that's long before Donald Trump came onto the scene as a credible political candidate, before he became president or anything like that. And the element of the person or the people who come with the red cap or the red cloak is not specific to someone who could be attributed to Donald Trump. So I don't actually think it has anything to do with him. I think it's just a coincidence. However, it could relate to China and there being a war in which India, China, the Islamic nations in Africa are on the adversarial side of the war to the United States. But it could just as equally come from something that is otherworldly, like a ET intervention. But the crucial thing when it comes to it being the real prophecy, the real Hopi prophecy, is that it's not as simple as some guy in a red cap. The great white brother who returns, who sparks this entire event of purification, is a Hopi tribesman who has gone off to the east and returned as a white man, but with black hair. And so regardless of what he's wearing, if he doesn't have the black hair, then it's not the one. And so I do believe that this prophecy is not related to Donald Trump at all, but it is a bigger picture prophecy about there being two paths for humanity and that we have to choose. The higher path in the diagram of the rock facing that the prophecy is etched on is not the higher path of consciousness. It's a path of elevation in the material world, in which humanity elevates itself and then the people at the top get to drink the cream of technological advancement and religion and manufactured existence. But that staircase of advancement that they create for themselves gets cut off at a point because it's based on darkness and the exploitation of the earth and the exploitation of fellow humans. And so when there's a return of the Great Spirit in the form of this great white brother or the Pahana, then those people will be basically purified from the earth. So they will be eliminated and the life path for that course of humanity will end. Those who are left behind are going to be living like the Hopi. These are the ones who will be given, they're just the ordinary people. They may end up being very similar to the biblical line of the meek shall inherit the earth, very similar to that, where those who have been exploited or those who have not been part of the material world order will be given an opportunity to redeem themselves or will be rewarded for their faith and their deliverance of the covenant that was made by continuing to live and also by ascending into the new world. So that's the prophecy. I sure hope that it's an alien intervention. I think I'd much rather take my chances with an alien intervention, to be honest, rather than a world war, because the sound of an alien intervention where the extraterrestrials, the otherworldly creatures that come falling from the stars have a greater level of intelligence and discretion than us humans, and they can pick and choose from the billions of people who are alive. They can identify and find and pick and choose those who are responsible for the mess that we've made for ourselves. I like the idea of that because as imperfect as I am, I've never been in control of anything. And so I kind of feel a little bit safer than I would say if I was, one of the world's leaders or something. So this has been a rather messy episode of the show. But if only you knew what I had to go through just to make it happen. And thank you for still being with me. My name's Ellie and you can find me at Ellie Dreams Down Under on YouTube. For everyone who is listening on one of KGRA's broadcasting platforms, thank you. If you want to be a member of the KGRA viewership family and watch any of your favorite hosts in a chat environment with like-minded watchers, experiencers and spiritualists, or just weirdos like me, then go to live.kgradb.com and choose promo code Ellie to get 30% off your subscription. That's it for today. It's been a pleasure. Until next time.